why don't we go ahead and kick it off? So thank you everybody for joining us. It's nice to see everybody. My name is Chris Winter. I'm the Executive Director of the Getchis Wilkinson Center for Natural Resources, Energy, and the Environment here at Colorado Law School. And we're thrilled to have everybody with us here in the room today. Thank you for joining us. We have many people online as well. And so we're very excited to have everybody joining us. For those of you who aren't here every day, welcome to Colorado Law School. And we're very excited to be able to host this conversation about the Northeast Arizona Water Rights Settlement Act of 2024. And we're especially grateful for our guests who are joining us. Each summer, the Getchis Wilkinson Center hosts a conference on the Colorado River. And last June, President Nygren joined us here at the law school. It was a few short weeks after the settlement had been announced, and the room downstairs, the courtroom, was buzzing literally with details about the settlement. There were hundreds of people in attendance at the conference. And during the conference, President Nygren shared with the audience that 30% of the homes on the Navajo reservation still do not have access to clean water. They're hauling in water for their basic needs. And President Nygren also underscored the importance of continued dialogue and the building of partnerships in order to win this long-term struggle for justice and equity. And this work has been going on for decades and generations. And so all the work that folks are doing today builds on so much work that others have done before them. And so while we celebrated the announcement in June, we knew that there was so much more work that had to be done. And these conversations and partnerships that we're working on today are key to making progress. So we're very honored to be able to host this important conversation today, and we're looking forward to learning what we can all do to help the prospects for the settlement in the halls of Congress, which we all know is a very complicated and sometimes confusing place to be. So with that, I'm honored to introduce Professor Vanessa Racehorse with the American Indian Law Program here at Colorado Law School, who's co-hosting the event with us today. Professor Racehorse.
Thank you so much. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the American Indian Law Program, I wanted to give a brief welcome and thank you all for joining today's really important event. And anybody on Zoom who is talking, if you could mute yourself, that would be fantastic. So a few words of introduction for our special guest speakers. Today we have joining us from the Navajo Nation Department of Justice, Mr. Stant and Mr. Witherspoon. So Mr. MacArthur Stant, Mac, who is to arrive shortly, is an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation, a descendant of the Hopi tribe, as well as Native Hawaiian. Mr. Stant is a graduate of Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law, and he is also barred in the state of New Mexico, as well as with the Navajo Nation bar. At the Navajo Nation DOJ, he's worked in the human... Adele, if you could please mute yourself, that would be greatly appreciated. So let's see. At the Navajo Nation DOJ, he's worked in the Human Services and Government Unit and currently works in the Water Rights Unit. Mr. Dwight Witherspoon is a member of the Navajo Nation as well. He has graduated from Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law with a certificate in Indian law after serving 2 terms on the Navajo Nation Council. He's also licensed with the state and the Navajo Nation Bar. At the Navajo Nation DOJ, he also currently works in the Water Rights Unit. And the moderator for today's discussion and the Q&A portion will be Mr. Daniel Cordelis, who is a member of the Navajo Nation, an attorney, as well as a director of the Tribal Water Institute at the Native American Rights Fund. He is also a graduate of Colorado Law School. So please join me in welcoming all of our speakers.
I have a soft voice, so hopefully this provides for those at least online. When you generally introduce yourself in Navajo, you generally introduce yourself by introduction of your clans so that anybody that might be related to you can identify how to address you. And so, Che Dwight Witherspoon, you Yenishat Doli Dene Tachini Nishla. And so my first clan is derived matrilineal from my mother, and that's Red Running Into the Water people. That's Tachini. So water is actually a part of that clan, and many of the Navajo clans, water is a part of their clan. My second clan is a description of those German metal hats from the World War. And that's that face for Johnny. So my dad's mother was German. And then but Ahi is my third clan. And that's under the Leaf clan, my mom's dad. And then my dad's dad, he was Scottish. And so if anybody's German, Scottish, then usually how we relate to each other. If somebody's first clan is touching, then I address them as my mother or my, sibling, brother or sister. If their second clan is Touchini, then I would address them as my son or my daughter. If their third clan is Touchini, I would address them as my grandmother or grandfather. And then my Nullies would be the fourth clan. And so kinship certainly is very important, and that's why we do introductions. I suspect some people have to maybe leave in an hour because you have a class or something like that. So Mac and I both non-traditional students who I graduated in 2022 from ASU. And so we're both very familiar with the experience of going to law school and now working for the nation. So we understand, and we have a long presentation, certainly longer than an hour, a lot of information. What we're going to cover is kind of Navajo's need for water. So the Navajo Nation is 27,000 square miles. It's comparable to the state of West Virginia or the country of Ireland. We are the largest land-based and Indian tribe in the country. And it's amazing how the Navajo Nation has expanded its land base about 19 different times. I don't know how many tribes can say that they've expanded their land base that many times, but the Navajo Nation has. So when you have federal reservations created, due to the Winters document, you have the implicit recognition for water that should go along with meeting the purpose of that reservation. Well, for Navajo, it's for a permanent homeland. And so we have different dates for all these expansions potentially attached to water rights. Mac and I are kind of on a multiple public education tour. We first went out to our chapters and we did a presentation that kind of went over two different vehicles to be able to obtain water rights. You have the stream adjudication, or the court, essentially in your respective state, and we have land base in all 4 states. We have Wolf Spring Ranch in Colorado as well. It's not trust land, but it's free land. And we have to obtain water in the respective states. So water has its own boundaries, and trying to take advantage, we're going to kind of present a little bit of our projects and how our vision involves moving water from between basins, between states, to solve some of our challenges. We'll cover some of the challenges the nation faces, contaminations, production, water quality issues. We have 110 communities, and so some of them absolutely have water challenges, and so we'll cover a lot of that. We have 4 water bills before Congress right now, and we'll do cover 3 of them. One in Arizona, 2 in New Mexico, and what's the status in Congress? Where are they at? What we wanted, why we're doing this kind of additional round of public education is we have a call to action. And the call to action is to encourage people that want to support the nation's water rights to write their congressional representative. Our vision is, we know we have Navajos all around the world. When I was on council, I went to the World Indigenous Peoples Conference in Norway. We found that there was a Navajo living in worked at a radio station over in Norway. And we know we have Navajos in all 50 states. And we want to maybe wake up the sleeping giant and encourage them to write their congressional representatives to support these water bills. And literally in this lame duck section, we just have weeks to get this done. Our litigation in New Mexico, which started about 40 years ago, as one of those vehicles. The other one is settlement. In Arizona, we had our claims on the Little Colorado River introduced in 1985. We had our first hearing on that LCR last summer. So you can see this is taking almost a lifetime for some cases, decades, to be able to claim your water rights. Phase 2 deals with about 12 different water categories, and it's in 2027. And so we're going to convey a little bit about how settlement is certainly a better vehicle to obtain water rights for the tribe. Let me begin with Louise and Jean. You see the wheelbarrow, they have multiple items to be able to haul water. So I think they have to haul about 1.5 miles. This was taken by one of our Navajo Nation hydrologists, Crystal Thule Cordova, and she knows that. And knows that they haul the water. And so the Navajo Nation needs certainly water for its people. Much of the land is very arid. Certainly we need water for land. We need water for livestock. The nation has been very dependent upon groundwater. And so being able to get water settlements to bring in surface water to address, provide some redundancy over time systems, opportunities for additional growth is important. Important certainly for future generations. The settlement is trying to look, not for just, so in the first phase and second phase, you looked at what is your past and present use, and then what is your future use. So projecting hopefully 100 years out for water needs. Certainly the nation is in a food desert. We have only 13 grocery stores on the Navajo Nation. And so being able to produce our own food is important. Certainly we have a farmer here. In the picture we have Commissioner Camille Tootin speaking with the Speaker of the Navajo Nation, Crystalline Curley. And we have President Nygren also on her tour. We wanted to give her an experience of what Navajos have to do to haul water. And so she came out, and we certainly were able to share information with her firsthand. And so here you have in the squash blossom the Attorney General for the Navajo Nation, Ethel Branch. You have some interior representatives, and my colleague over here, you can see with the long hair is there in the back. MacArthur stand. So Commissioner Tootin's certainly trying to connect the water to the tank and to get it into the truck and experience. One of the notes is the truck broke down on the way back to the house. So, water is heavy, and many of the roads are not paved. And so they can do damage, certainly, to your vehicle over time and wear and tear. Certainly, there's an expense.
I'm going to add the concept of the word road, I think, is an inappropriate word to use. We have both been raised on the Navajo reservation, and access is very difficult. And so the concept is a mile in a city compared to a mile on a tribal reservation road is far different. So please remember that. Like, if the distance says 5 miles, for us here, 5 miles at the most might be 10 minutes. But on a road on the reservation where these hauling locations are at, if you go 5 miles an hour, that's about as fast as you can go. So that all of a sudden means, by simple math, it's an hour one way. Thank you.
So there's a severe access gap on the Navajo Nation, and certainly we don't read any of our PowerPoints, but I'll just highlight on the second bullet there. The EPA estimates about 18% of Navajo homes don't have running or piped water to the homes. But the Navajo Nation estimate, certainly for certain communities, is closer to 30 to 40%, depending on which chapter you're looking at. Water hauling, certainly there's been some study that Dr. Carletta Chief, who's also Navajo from the University of Arizona, looked at, the kind of data water haulers. And certainly they have to travel on average 5 to 10 miles. They're doing it for certainly a great period of time. And there's certainly a challenge that they face in hauling water, particularly related to cost. So if you're in a municipality, certainly like Phoenix, getting 100 gallons of water, you might pay 20 to 40 cents. But on Navajo, that water hauling might be $13.30. We have many elders that live certainly on the reservation. Many of the younger people leave and work to find employment off the reservation. And so many of the elders are on fixed incomes. So it's definitely an expense to our elders. Because of COVID, certainly we had a spotlight kind of shined on the Navajo Nation. We had a huge amount of people that caught COVID, a good amount of people that passed. I had an aunt that caught COVID, and she had passed as well. And so resources were brought in, and certainly water was one of those resources for the families that were brought in. The vulnerability to infectious diseases, one of the basic things you can do is wash your hands. And so having access to running water is certainly an issue that many of our families and communities faced. This is a pipeline looking towards the San Francisco Peaks Flagstaff. That community is the Loop chapter, and they drilled a well in Loop, and they were trying to bring water to a different community called Delcon. And Delcon was building a new medical facility. However, it was delayed because they didn't have sufficient water to open it. Even the well that they drilled in Loop, it still did not have good water quality. So the water they're actually using is coming from the other direction in Greasewood Springs region to bring to that. And another one of the projects, we're going to try to interconnect some 3 wells drilled near Twin Arrows, closer to Flagstaff, connect to that loop to blend the water and to make it of quality that certainly will help Delcon, because Delcon is the chapter that certainly needs water. We know water has its own boundaries, and so which way does the water flow? If you think of the Little Colorado River, it crosses the Navajo Reservation. Generally, the water flows from the Black Mesa regions to the south, but the Little Colorado River starts in kind of the Apache Mountains in New Mexico, and it travels to the north. And it'll feed the Little Colorado, and it's a tributary to the Colorado River at the confluence. We have many, certainly, tributaries. where the upper basin starts in Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, parts of New Mexico, and then they have that dividing line between Lee's Ferry. How many of you have had water law? Okay. So how many acre feet did the upper basin get apportioned in 1922? 7.5 million acre feet. How many gallons is an acre foot?
325,000.
325,851 gallons, yes. So people describe it better with like, you have a football field and it's 1 acre feet deep, or 1 acre parcel of land is 1 foot deep. And that's kind of like an acre foot. The lower basin also got appropriated 7.5 million acre feet, and Mexico 1.5 million acre feet. 100 years ago, in a year that they had a lot of water, how many have an idea of how much the water the Colorado River produces per 12, 13, depending on whether you get enough good snow year or not. So it's certainly over appropriated. And we have certainly the post-2026 proposed federal action to manage the river, and the 7 western states have great concern about their water from the Colorado River. Which makes it challenging because the Navajo Nation is both in the upper basin and in the lower basin. We have 44 chapters in Arizona on the lower basin. But most of the water in our settlement is actually coming from the upper basin. So we absolutely need to use upper basin water to serve our reservation.
Can I say a few things right now? This is one of my favorite maps because from a legal standpoint, I want to emphasize sovereign at this moment. For our country, we believe in sovereigns. We have a federal sovereign, we have state sovereigns, and we have tribal sovereigns who are not included in the Constitution, and that's why we have some of the difficulties we have today. But let's go over this concept here. In 1922, the federal government created the Compact for the Colorado River, and that has changed the western states ever since. Probably the most influential decision that has ever occurred for the basin states, which will include Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and California. Even though we don't hear about it much, even though it's not as widely popular as other information, for the western United States, the Colorado River is life. And if you are a member of a nation, of a tribe, thank you for being here. For the rest of you, thank you for being here. I mean, this is beyond my expectations. And my example of that is I'm almost out of pamphlets for everyone. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I know it's the end of the semester. This is not easy to be here to give us our time. Thank you so much. I'm going to divert really quickly just for a couple of minutes. I used to be a high school teacher. So the concept is when I see a room full of people, I get excited because I think that's an opportunity. I don't expect this from all of you. Out of curiosity, why are you here? Would one or two of you share? Why are you here when finals are so close? And this is an annoying thing to be at right now. Why are you here? Please, just a couple of you. Yes.
I'm a TED Scripts fellow. I'm an auditor. And last year, I produced a podcast called Water Under Pressure, where we spent the first 3 episodes talking about the enormity of the Colorado River Compact and water law in the Southwest and how big everything was. And then for the final 2 episodes, we were supposed to offer solutions, and it was very lopsided. The solutions were bullshit compared to the enormity of the problem. And I feel like the way that we learn about reporting and the way we think about this issue, I need help. So that's why I'm here.
We all need help. I am so happy you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll say it in Navajo. Please, a couple people, yes.
I'm a student from Peru, and also when I saw the band, I was very excited and very curious how the Navajo community is still survive during this day, and I would like to know how they, or what kind of rights they have related to the water, because we have the same issue in Peru. I was working before with a community in Peru in the jungle, and they have the same issues. They were, except that the water that was close to the community was contaminated, so they were facing different issues to access to the right of water.
I hope I say this right. I'm trying to be international. Gracias.
So I'm Carl, I'm from Ghana. We have abundance of water, so many water bodies. We have rains like 9 months in a year. And I come to a different jurisdiction where I see water scarcity and all sorts of compacts. So that's the main reason why I'm taking water law. I want to learn as much as I can, so that when I go back and we have issues, because currently we don't, there will be someone at least in there who can suggest solutions. Yeah.
Again, I thought I saw one more hand. If not, that is okay. Again, I just am grateful for the energy you have here. I'm grateful for your attendance. I'm grateful for your interest. So thank you for letting me be a part of your day. The reason this is so important, let's go back to sovereign. The United States, as a sovereign, has the belief that they have the right to dictate and regulate within their boundaries without the influence or pressure or difficulty of other sovereigns. I'll make it more centralized. The state of California, got the C right, got everything else wrong. The state of Colorado believes the same. Colorado believes that water law is a state right, and that the federal government is trying to stay out of it as much as possible. The dilemma is, we, as has been mentioned, live in a very interesting situation. The state of Colorado wants to freely regulate, as a sovereign, their water rights. This map shows the complexity. My amazing colleague, Dwight Witherspoon, has mentioned this a little bit already. But the concept of the Navajo Nation as a sovereign has the difficulty of dealing with sovereigns that no other sovereign in the nation has. What I mean by that is, you see these, we talked about borders. The Navajo Nation is in 3 states. That means 3 other sovereigns who are very much wanting to be a part of the regulation and the activities that happen on the Navajo Nation, especially water. Then when it comes to water law, because of the federal government and the 1922 compact, Colorado Compact, the Colorado River has been divided up into 2 basins that almost serve like separate sovereigns. It's odd. I'm going to call them quasi-sovereigns. I'm going to call the upper basin and the lower basin quasi-sovereigns. They have this, they have this inability. If you're going to cross into the other, you need the support of the federal government and of the basin states. The Navajo Nation is in the upper basin. Now, the lower basin states, as I mentioned, are Arizona, Nevada, and California. Except for this, I'm going to call it pink. That's what my eyes see. That pink is upper basin. The Navajo Nation is over 90% of the upper basin. And because of the 1922 compact, because of the law of the river, because of the strictness of these documents, there is a limitation of what can be done. So the Navajo Nation as a sovereign, which means we should be able to regulate and activate our rights as we choose, has to deal with 3 states, 2 basins, and the federal law of the river of the Colorado. I'm not bragging. I don't want to brag. This is not a brag. But I think in the United States, there is no sovereign that has more complicated water right issues than the Navajo Nation. Most tribes deal with one state, one basin. Okay? This is one of the situations where more is not better. Right? We have more to deal with. And so that is one of the reasons why we are grateful to be here today with you. I'm going to stop and pause and go back to Dwight, who is gracious enough to let me interfere with his part of the presentation.
I wanted to let you know, some of them are gonna have to leave in an hour for classes,
Makes sense.
so that's why I was trying to speed.
And I'm gonna be quiet now because I've taken up more time than necessary.
This map with the legend over there kind of shows the number of homes without piped running water. So the red is over 200 homes, and you can see most of those are in Utah and Arizona. The orange is 150 to 200 homes. The yellow is 150 to, is that 100 to 150? And then you got 100, and then the gray is just 0 to 50. And you can see much difference between New Mexico and Arizona. And in New Mexico, they have built into their political collection of taxes tribal infrastructure fund that goes back to potentially for infrastructure on reservations and the Pueblos, of course Navajo, the Apaches, tribes. And so many of them can propose possible water projects, road projects, facilities. In Arizona and Utah, particularly, you have to go to the legislature and propose for trying to obtain funding for a particular project. And so they're very different in that way. But this conveys certainly kind of the need for water and connections. One of the challenges is uranium. Over 520 abandoned uranium mines that occurred, and certainly that contaminated a number of the water sources. And when we presented a number of the chapters, we were educated about which particular chapters had, that challenge. Not only uranium, but also arsenic. And so this is kind of information from the Navajo that did research, particularly in Arizona, but it's identifying the kind of water source and then the locations of the abandoned uranium mines as well. The contamination level in uranium is in blue dots and arsenic in orange. And so you have the federal kind of maximum contamination levels. And then you can see by the years how it kind of grows and provides information about the amount of contamination. So there's about 11% of the livestock wells that exceed the maximum contaminant levels set by the EPA, 17% for arsenic. There is a link certainly between uranium and cancer, and there's a number of federal legislation, the RECA downwinders. If you can essentially prove that you're contaminated in a downwinder, then you could potentially get compensated for loss of your family member. One of the other challenges is certainly brackish water. This happens to be kind of a diagram of the Coconino Aquifer, which is huge, has a lot of water. However, the concentration level, kind of the Mogollon Rim in Arizona, provides a recharge, and it captures a salt concentration and kind of takes that water towards the north. And so in many regions, it's saltier than seawater. And so it's very expensive to try to treat this water. If it was not that expensive, certainly all the coastal communities would be able to do salinity treatment centers, but because it's so expensive, that's not occurring. This is our vision. This is called the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority Global Map. And unfortunately, all the blue lines are not water. Those are Navajo Tribal Utility Authority's distribution system to the communities. All those little black dots are homes without running water. The green are kind of existing projects, as well as the yellow. And then the red are proposed settlement projects that would bring certainly surface water to many of the communities and try to intertie, create redundancy, and address many of the challenges that we just talked about: uranium, arsenic, salinity, and certainly production. I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague here.
I'm grateful to know that our time is limited, so I will abridge my comments. I think Dwight has talked about the concept that we have had to do this for most of 2024. And the process of getting water rights, and what we're specifically talking about right here is Arizona. But we went to the chapters in Arizona on the Navajo Nation. And what we just shared with you, we didn't have to share with them, because that was their life. That was their daily life. But we're sharing it with you because we need to help bridge that gap. One thing that is interesting, and hopefully you're familiar with, that for a tribe to get water rights, there's two main paths. One path is litigation, going into a court. The other part is settlement. That's the other mechanism. If you go on the Department of Reclamation, Bureau of Reclamation's website, and if you type up water settlement, there's on their webpage, they will advocate and say that settlement is better than litigation, and that they would prefer that. We've noticed that tribes prefer that. The reason I bring it up is because we had to help our members understand that settlement is more conducive to what we're hoping for. And here are the reasons why. Some important words on the first bullet point: infrastructure. Here's what I'm going to say. It amazes me. I had my childhood on the reservation. I knew my childhood was different. This time of year, when I was a kid, I'd watch TV and I'd see all the commercials, all the TV shows, and all the movies, and that was not my life, right? You know, Christmas decorations and just going shopping and just trees with enormous amounts of toys. And I would look out my window of my house and see my home, which I loved. Okay? My reservation is beautiful to me. I love it. And I was fine where I was at. I was happy with my life. But I knew it was not the same where these things came from. Not at all. Okay? And that's because of infrastructure, lack of infrastructure. What's amazing now is that I can go onto my reservation, and this is amazing because I can get cell phone service on the Navajo Nation. That's amazing. Okay? Think about that. It's technology that is life-changing, that is cultural changing, what the internet can do. It is a different type of technology. It uses different type of service, right? The way it can be accessed is so much different than what I'm going to call fundamental resources. Water is a fundamental resource. Water is life. Water is life. But for water to get to people, it can be expensive, it can be difficult, it can be challenging. And so that's why this infrastructure is so important. If a tribe uses the court litigation to get their water rights, we're going to get what we call a paper right. we know this as law students, we know this as attorneys, that yes, the law will recognize it and give you a paper right, but beyond that, it is your action. And in a settlement, tribes can have more, like infrastructure. That's beyond a paper right. So the infrastructure will bring in what we consider to be wet water. Water that is necessary for your domestic use, your commercial use, your industrial use. These are of this nature. Again, Dwight just showed you the NTUA map. We want to make what our treaty says. Our treaty says a permanent homeland. To have a permanent homeland, we need this fundamental resource. Trust me, I'm shocked and amazed. And my kids just don't care when we're on the reservation. And I'm like, do you guys get internet? And they're like, yeah, of course. I'm like, you don't get it, guys. I get internet in the middle of the reservation. I'm so grateful for that. But at the same time, there's not water there. Okay? So this amazing technology of internet is there, but water is not. So this is why we need this global water supply. Now, when it comes to real water, we also want it to be safe and reliable. Water security. Okay, water security. I think Dwight's already said this. 30% of homes in the Navajo Nation don't have water. A settlement would do that. Now, imagine 30% of homes, right? The average home on the reservation has 4 people, so we can go out. I have to quit now because my time is extended.
So the water doesn't actually go to the homes. Those regional projects bring waters to the communities. The federal IHS system, Indian Health Services, has been authorized to create an SDS listing for tribal homes, not just Navajo, all 574 tribes across the country who don't have running water and have the funding potentially to extend water to individual homes. So I just want to correct you on that.
And I'm so grateful for Dwight, trust me. He's very important. Just a few more things. The words that I want to show to you. Security, right? That's a legal importance, right? Opportunity, growth. Those are legal aspects, right? People expect and hope the law to provide these. A pathway home. Over half of the Navajo Nation membership don't live on the reservation. Because of the lack of resources that are available there, this would be nation changing. So pathway back home. I spent most of my adult life off the reservation. I'm grateful that I'm back on. And then confidence. So I just wanted to point out those words. That's what a settlement can bring, not only to the nation, but to other tribes as well.
Can I just say, this seems like a great breaking point for students who might need to slip out so that we don't have a lot of commotion while you guys are presenting.
For those who have to leave, thank you very much. Please go to the Navajo Nation Department of Justice website. Please also go to the Navajo Nation Water Rights Commission website. So hopefully we can reconnect soon. Good luck on your finals. Thank you. Oh my gosh, good luck. Hey, and thanks for hosting NALTA Moot Court last year too. We don't have enough time to go over anything more than that, but in terms of priority, 4th priority water, 3,600 acre feet. Then we have the Little Colorado River, any water that reaches the nation. And then we have washes, and then as we've talked about, the aquifers as well. By the way, that last slide, when we talked to our membership, that was one of the most interesting slides they wanted to talk about. Because their whole life, they've been looking for their water rights, and they've had many changes throughout their lives on those numbers. And so they were very, very sensitive and very, very wanting to be aware of what was happening. Just a side note. Anyway, okay. So we mentioned that already. Now, in regards to the ask of funding for the settlement, it has been $5 billion, and this is something that has come up often and frequent. The concept is, though, in regards to the cost of other water settlements, it is very, very similar. Meaning the Navajo Nation, in terms of land, is the largest reservation in the United States, comparable to West Virginia. And the population of the Navajo Nation is the largest in the United States. And so the Hopi as well, the San Juan Southern Paiute as well. So all of this is very significant. And again, it might be a large number in comparison to other water settlements, but this is also the largest water settlement that has ever occurred. So it is all relative. Okay. Oh, at the same time, if we're able to get our water, we're going to have to move that water, and that takes energy, and that takes other projects as well. So that's what this is about for. Thank you, Dwight.
In talking about the projects themselves, we have certainly an example in the Navajo Gallup water supply system project that was approved by Congress in 2009. They started construction in this last decade, and they were authorized at $870 million and up to $1.3 billion. But because of inflation, because of COVID, because the San Juan generation plant closed during this time, they then said, even though they were at 30% design on a diversion site, they said, well, this is existing infrastructure, may we take advantage and potentially use the intake for that power plant off of the San Juan River, and that's what they decided. So for all those reasons, it delayed certainly the project, the cost went up, and so the ask is to get an additional $800 million to build essentially a project. And so Navajo in New Mexico has a settlement on the San Juan River. That was the major project, part of the settlement, but it was very costly. And so these are comparable costs. This is going to take water out of the Lake Powell up near Page, but our community is called La Chi in that region. And the Navajo Nation is already using millions of its dollars starting this project. We're already looking at putting a water treatment plant up and using the Navajo generations power system intake, and it's started. So this will be just a connection essentially to that system, and it's going to also provide lateral certainly to the Hopi 1882 reservation across all the way to Keams Canyon, and it's $1.7 billion. And that's kind of current dollars. When it's potentially built down the road, who knows how much it's potentially going to be. There's that kind of pipeline that we were showing you earlier. So you have the loop to Delcon in red there in the above site, but we had 3 wells drilled by Peabody in the region that I represented when I was on council. Is called the Zithlagene region, and they were taking pristine Navajo aquifer, which is from the Navajo and Hopi reservations, and they were slurrying coal over to Mojave in Nevada. Well, I had a number of activists in my region that were really opposed to that because they had pristine springs, and because of the slurring, they felt like they had overdrafted the aquifer and the springs weren't flowing. Even though it was closed in 2005, there are still springs that haven't recharged. And so certainly that's a concern. So those 3 wells were drilled potentially to slurry the coal as an option. But we want to take advantage of those because that's sea aquifer water, but in that area, because it's on the west side of the Little Colorado River, the quality is better. Even Flagstaff has purchased Red Gap Ranch, and they're going to be taking water to Flagstaff from the same region just south of the reservation. But we want to connect those wells to that Loop Delcon and certainly blend the water to provide certainly for our needs. And that's called the Southwest Regional Project. The Navajo,
Same slide.
the Code Talker lateral is using the infrastructure for the Navajo Gallop. In the Navajo Gallop authorization, there was an authorization for 6,411 acre feet to come into Arizona once you get a settlement. So they started building Navajo Gallop from the bottom up. And so the last will be connecting and doing the water treatment plan for take water from the San Juan River and then start delivering it. And so it stops at the reservation line between New Mexico and Arizona because you have to have a settlement to be able to use that system and to take water into Arizona. And so this yellow will connect and take water certainly into Arizona from that infrastructure and hopefully connect to the Ganado system. I think this is a $195 million project.
And one thing that when Dwight says it's going from state to state, then that just triggers in my mind the concept of sovereignty, right? The Navajo Nation, it's the Navajo Nation. But we have to have more than that in order to get water to where we want it to go within our own sovereignty.
Yeah, New Mexico is very concerned about water being taken out of the San Juan and then delivered back into Arizona. And so they have amendment language and certainly want to protect their interests. The Ganado Regional Groundwater Project is using actually Coconino Aquifer, and this is kind of one of the three communities. There are the Coconino aquifers of quality that make use of it, but it's to expand that distribution system as well. The Lupton area, so they're going to actually use the Gallup water supply system, but there are Navajo communities south of Gallup, and that's listed there. And then they can potentially connect and take water into Arizona as you get water to these communities south of Gallup. The Four Corners project is taking water out of the San Juan as well. And that yellow up there at the top, it would be connecting and taking water into Arizona. And then certainly connect to many of the communities on the far east part of the reservation in Arizona. And that's a $780 million project.
Often we have hydrologists who are able to join us from the Department of Water Resources, and this is one of their favorite maps and projects because in one of the maps we showed you where there are houses that don't have access to water, this area is one of the areas that were in the red. So so our hydrologists are very excited because it will again bring access to a very limited area. Yes.
On that basis, are you able to start conducting these concurrently, or are you having to prioritize maybe projects like that? Are the resources constrained in that way, or?
Great question. There is action happening at the moment. So there are pipelines that are being put in. There are treatment centers that are being built, and so in NTUA is the utility for the nation. So there is stuff happening at the moment. So I really appreciate that question. But again, to even expand it even greater. But there is stuff happening, but at a limited basis. But the nation is paying for a large amount of it, just so you know as well.
So this Black Mesa Regional Project is many of the communities I represented when I was on council. The Black Mesa, Forest Lake, Hard Rock, Pinon, and Whipplewell chapters are the 5 that I represented. But this is essentially using the pristine aquifer called the Navajo aquifer and expanding the distribution system to help these communities. The Kayenta area project is taking water up in Utah at Helchita and bringing it down to Old Jato, and certainly that's the region, if you've seen the movie Forrest Gump, that Mac likes to talk about.
He took my line.
there's certainly that long road that they're on in the movie. So there's many homes in that region that don't have pipe running water. But certainly you're taking water from, across state boundaries. The infrastructure for the Utah settlement, which we have been approved, it's for 81,500 acre feet. Hopefully will be decreed at the first in January. But we can't use any of the funding for that to go into Arizona. We have to use all funding from an Arizona settlement. And so sometimes you might have to expand that infrastructure to account for larger use of water. Obviously that makes it expensive.
So again, on that map, this is area of red, where over 200 houses still don't have access. So you have this as one of your handouts. And so this was very important in us informing the members of our nation and going to the chapter houses and talking to them about it. Because I'm amazed to say, for the Arizona water settlement, this is our fourth attempt. We have never gotten this far before. So that's wonderful, but we're still not there, right? We're not where we want to be, but we've never gotten this far before. And because we've never gotten this far before, we had to make sure we broke it down for our membership. And we had to tell them that in terms of the settlement agreement that was in Arizona, with the state parties and with the Hopi and the San Juan Southern Paiute, and then that among this, what was important was the concept that the council approved it, and that was very important. And then after the council approved it, which is around May, then now we're right here. And I guess
We're in December.
yes, I was gonna say reality. There was an old song. I'm from the '80s, so forgive me. But reality used to be a friend of mine. Might be the right way to describe this happening right now. Okay, at least one person laughed, right? I got one. Yeah. So anyway, so the concept is this is the reality that we're at right now. And so we are in Congress. And so the concept is looking positively, looking forward. These are the other elements that will happen as the settlement gets approved and moves forward. These are actions that have happened. We had Senate hearings, we had House hearings, we had President Nugent who testified at both. And then, again, I do like the word hoping, right?
So we have a New Mexico settlement as well. It's called the San Jose Stream System Water Rights Settlement Act of 2024. And the respective bills in the Senate is 4998 and the House side is 8945. And so we're going to cover just a little bit of information about that as quick as possible. But this gives you some orientation. In the Rio Grande Basin, you have certainly the San Jose and the Rio Perco, but not our chapters on the very eastern portion of the reservation in New Mexico. There's portions of the chapter, about 8 different chapters that are in this Rio San Jose Basin, and then Tohajale, certainly in the Rio Perco Basin, that is a part of this settlement. You have this slide because you can see the water challenge area in this region. It's one of the basic driest counties or regions in the state of New Mexico. So you have here some lakes, but there's no water in these lakes. Another example, Tohajale has some infrastructure for their water that's very corrosive. And so it's corroding the infrastructure there. And this is another example. This is not 30 years, this is 18 months. And so they're going to connect to the Albuquerque water system. And this is kind of the proposed pipeline alignment for that project. There's certainly a number of plans that are developed to try, they look at all the different options. You know, can you use surface water? Can you use groundwater? Where can you potentially take it? How far? How expensive is it going to be? And certainly, this is some of the connectivity to address some of the water needs in that region. The funding is $223,271,000, and it's a fund-based settlement. So it would be providing the nation with the funds, and then the nation decides which projects it's going to work on. And that can be, you know, obviously residential, but certainly can be agricultural as well. The amounts would be 2,444 acre feet, and this is groundwater for the two basins. 417 for livestock, 493 acre feet for traditional storage from the stock ponds. There's very checkerboard in this region, and so the United States is responsible to assist those allottees with obtaining their water rights, so the allottees are not a part of this settlement. This is just conveys the same. The difference, so you see the negotiations in New Mexico occurred for about 2 years. And then we got the settlement the same month agreement. And then we got the Navajo Nation to approve it as well. And then, you know, the very next day, President Nygren, less than 24 hours, signed both of them. And then we were able to introduce it into Congress, and you got this respective things that have to occur. But the actual settlements, if they're approved, they actually need to go back to the court in the respective states. So in Arizona, go to the court in the stream adjudication to decree the settlement agreement. Same in New Mexico. Just some key actions that indicated the legislation being signed, the introduction by Teresa Ledger Fernandez on the House side, testimony by President and then Senator Heinrich and Lujan introducing it on the Senate side, and then a hearing as well. So these occurred and follows, you have it in your packet, similar timeline. We have weeks essentially to get the lame duck session of Congress to approve it.
So again, I'm just going to add something before Dwight starts. And if you would have told me at the beginning of the year when we started doing this that I would be in Colorado right now, I would have asked the question, why? And so, but now I understand. And again, it's very much like a ripple effect. And when this first started, it was the focus of the audience, the focus was on the members of the Navajo Nation, because we needed to have that, first of all, that agreement with Hopi and with the San Juan Center Paiute. That was like step one. After that was accomplished, and for those who have any knowledge of Hopi Navajo relationships throughout history, it really can be considered a miracle, and it is grateful. So again, being a member of both, when I'm on the Hopi reservation, I get ridiculed for being Navajo. And when I'm on the Navajo reservation, I get ridiculed for being a Hopi. But it's all in good fun, I guess, right? So we got that taken care of. And then we needed to have information to the members about the settlement agreement. And then we needed to have the information to the members about the Settlement Act. And then it started to go a little bit further out because we started to reach out to the rest of Arizona. And then as it got into Congress and we realized that this was larger in terms of support, in terms of what is needed for this to happen. So for this consensus, it's even reached out and has included all of the basin states. And so I'm very happy to be here to meet other like-minded individuals who are hoping for the same thing. So, but just, it's an interesting how that has expanded. And it's always fun to use a water analogy when you're talking about water, right? So that nice little ripple effect. Yeah. So this is a very different one as well, but very equally as important.
So we indicated previously that Navajo Gallup has been approved, but it needs additional funding to meet the obligation that the Bureau of Reclamation from that settlement to build. And so it's requesting $800 million more with a little bit of amendment for a Sweetwater 2000 to go up back into Utah. And so this is the region. There are about 43 chapters that will be funded. It also provides water to the Jicarilla tribe as well as the city of Gallup. This is in the settlement. The cutter lateral is actually built and already providing 8 communities water and serving about a little over 1,050 families that are getting water in that cutter lateral system. The San Juan lateral, certainly there will be expansions to meet the needs of the chapters, but certainly Jicarilla and Gallup.
And I'm also going to mention on that map that where we talked about, that we mentioned over and over again about accessibility. If you look on this portion of the map, this area has that color with the lowest amount, meaning the fewest amount of houses that don't have access. So meaning this area, because there has been a settlement, because there has been work, it's already occurring. It's progressing well, but we just can't stop now. That would be tragic. So
Part of the infrastructure for the Navajo Gallup Water Supply System project, this is some of the infrastructure. You got pumping plants, storage facilities along the way, because it's a large, long pipeline. In the cutter lateral, you have that existing water that's being delivered, so they have a treatment plan, and that's what the water looks like. They took, I guess, measures to make sure that when they transitioned off of the groundwater to the surface water, that the water quality was going to be very similar, so they didn't even notice it in terms of taste or sight. And so they did a good job. Senator Lujan, as well as representatives from the Interior, did a field visit to check on where's our dollars going, how's the progress, and I'm going to sponsor a bill. I want to know some details with firsthand knowledge, and so they're visiting one of the infrastructure sites.
And this probably makes sense, but one of the reasons why it has been delayed is because of COVID, right? I mean, and that completely makes sense. It was a huge factor of why things had to change and why we needed to have amendments to extend the project. And that's the main thing. Not just the cost, but also the time necessary to complete the project. And this goes over that. So.
Yeah, we're going to skip kind of the secretary approved an extension to 2029 to allow for it. It was supposed to be built by the end of this year, and the funding was supposed to be used, but certainly it's going to take several additional years. This kind of goes over the same, the number of chapters served. There is a neat amendment that allows for water to be using that system and treatment and to take it back into Utah, but it's actually accounted for against Utah's water settlement, but using the infrastructure in New Mexico. We have certainly a similar process. You got to take it to introduction, Senate committees, House hearings, and trying to get Congress's approval here by the end of the year. This just highlights that it was passed in 2009. They needed to make those potential changes and get it extended to the 2029 timeframe. And this provides just a little bit of information about the hearings and the testimony and the extension. So that brings us to kind of our call to action. You have the respective legislative bills on the House and the Senate side. There is certainly phone that you can voice in concerns, you can email, but we're suggesting kind of those physical stacks that get sent into Congress. They estimate, one of those letters, represents so many thousand people that have the similar issue. And so those physical stacks tell a story. And so we certainly want to encourage, I'm gonna go to the next slide and then come back, because that link, when I link to it, it's gonna mock the presentation. But actually, it's in their packets.
Not all of them have it, but most have it.
Most of, if you're lucky enough, you have some of the templates, and then on the very back, it has, the House and the Senate link, and you just put in your zip code, and it'll tell you who's your congressional representative. So I wrote, Senator Kelly and Senator Sinema and Representative Eli Crane, based on my, zip code, so to speak, and where my congressional representatives. But it can be in any state. You can pull up the same information to be able to fill in that template. If you want to get a Word version, you can certainly go to the Navajo Nation's Department of Justice website. You just Google Navajo Department of Justice. It should be on the first page. There's a red call to action, and then there's the three bills for Gallup, for New Mexico's San Jose Stream System, and the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act. All three of them are there. Can make it very easy. We've been trying to use technology and sometimes encouraging people to do a short video that they could post to try to share our stories better. We need, as tribes, sometimes we need to do a better job of sharing our stories and using technology to do that. But that's kind of hashtag the Pass H2O settlements now. What do you think, Mac? Are we done?
I'm just looking at November 30th. So.
Did somebody win? Did anybody win yet?
No. Again, the hope would be to use social media to our advantage, and the desires for that haven't really come about. So I made a video, but I don't know where it's at right now. So
there was a professor from New Mexico Tech that also did a video after one of the presentations I did at Dannett College. So those are the only two that I know of right now for videos. But, yeah.
We have a question online. Is the packet available electronically that I could share with folks?
we can work on that.
Okay.
So, and so for those online who want the packet, I appreciate that, and we can.
I think there's been the request to try to put it on the Navajo Nation's Water Commission website,
Okay.
but not the Department of Justice website. So if they were to find it, that's possibly where they can access it.
And maybe you can pull up the department, the Water Commission website. And so the packet will work on it because we are giving it out. So we'll work on a digital version of that of that packet. And when we have that, it can be available on the Water Rights Commission website. And so hopefully we can bring up that site so you'll have an idea of what it looks like. But the Navajo Nation Water Rights Commission. And so we'll do that. But that I like the concept of let's have a discussion at the moment. So we're grateful that you're here. We really are. So if there are any comments or questions, we'll do our best.
Well, thanks for doing that. It was great. You mentioned the potential uses in the New Mexico settlement. On the Northeastern Arizona Water Rights Settlement, is that a strictly domestic water focused, or is there an ag component to that as well?
So the concept is in regards to, it gets very complicated, so I got to make sure I say it right. So, all right, so we have, again, one thing I think is and this is me trying to be funny again, in terms of acronyms, I think we do a pretty good job, right? You know, the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement, completely Arizona water. And then you're referring to New Mexico. So in New Mexico, the Navajo Nation already has water rights for the San Juan, and that goes over to the Navajo Gallup water supply project. And then your exact question, let me keep this in mind because sometimes we have to make sure that we don't overlap them. So repeat your question one more time.
So the first settlement we walked through, a lot of infrastructure. I'm curious what the eventual use is for those water.
Okay.
It looked like, based on the presentation, pretty much purely domestic. But
No.
I was wondering if there was an ag or maybe industrial component to it as well.
All uses.
Okay.
All uses for that Arizona water, for agriculture, for industry. So here's an interesting notion. So I have learned so much from being able to go to our chapters and our members, right? So we're hoping that the water can be used domestically is a big one, but it's not only domestically, it'll be for industrial, it'll be for other agriculture as well. But the concept is when we showed the dynamics and the logistics to our members, a lot of them were worried that some of the aquifer water, that I think it was we had 3,000 that could be used for industrial purposes. And a lot of our members were really concerned about that because of the history that they've had with mining in the past and how that has polluted the water and is still a problem. So they were like, wait a minute, you know, are people forcing us to do this? You know, and so we had to tell them, it's like, no, we want the nation to grow and we just don't want it domestic. We want all aspects of water use to be a part of it. And so we had to make sure they knew, and there was a power plant in Page, Arizona for decades. And so the majority of the upper basin water has been used for that power plant, but that's no longer being used in that way. So the point is we compared it to them and we said that power plant used this much water. What we're putting around can never do that again. You know, you can have industry for members of the nation who want to come back home, who want to start businesses, who want to use that water, and it's not going to hurt as it did before. So I hope I tangented a bit, but I hope that helps out a bit. But yeah, so a lot of the members were concerned about that.
So thanks for the presentation. It's really a lot of info, which makes me think. I mean, it's an amazing thing, right? I mean, the incredible complex law issues, engineering issues, right? Human rights issues too. They're all wrapped up in all of these bills. But with the Arizona settlement, I mean, I think it'd be great to just say how, like, 4 other attempts, right, legislatively. Why this one, and how did it come to be after we lost this case in front of the Supreme Court, when it would have been so easy for all the parties to say, sorry, like, you guys lost. Like, why should we be engaging with you? Like, how did you guys do that?
Hang on a minute, honey. I'm gonna have to mute this. I can't hear you.
That wasn't for us, but
What'd you say?
you're muting, correct?
Val?
Okay. Well, we're going to answer the question.
Val?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Please mute yourself.
So the former director of the Water Rights Unit, there are 7 units in Navajo's Department of Justice. Water Rights Unit is one. Stanley Pullock proposed trying to sue the federal government, the Bureau of Reclamation, as the manager of the river. If you're our trustee and the manager of the river, how are you accounting for the nation's water? And can you help us identify how much we should be getting? Now, obviously, the strategy as it went up on the appeals kind of changed somewhat, but it's so difficult to sue the federal government. If there's any monetary responsibility, they call it fiduciary responsibility. You have to have a federal statute that says we have this fiduciary responsibility or you're on your own. And that's essentially what the opinion came is, yes, you have this trust responsibility, but there is no fiduciary responsibility statutorily that you can look to hold the nation accountable as a trustee. So the ruling didn't take away from our water rights. And we're trying to secure it through settlement, but we're on our own, so to speak. Our federal trustee can only do so much, but they're not on the hook monetarily, fiduciary, like a normal trustee would be in a trustee type of relationship. So.
Then I'm going to add two more points. One is going to be narrow and one is going to be broad. So I'll start with the narrow. In terms of the decision we're referring to, the narrowness, again, is what Dwight just referred to, is that it was a very narrow portion of the Navajo Nation's water rights claims to the lower basin water. And again, it's a lot, but all of that needs to be said because that is how narrow it was. And so when we went to our chapters, that was another important question that a lot of members had. They followed the case and then they asked, did we lose our water rights? And no, we did not lose our water rights. We still have our claims. And then, from the opinion, the dissent, Gorsuch, I want to bring it up every time, right? Because he gave encouragement, He also gave scolding, right? Which is fun too, right? So he did both parts. But that concept of, that it was narrow, and then that scolding, it leads to my broad point. And the broad point is, I've had a chance to learn a lot about the law of the river. That 1922 compact, if you look at any photos that are trying to historically remember that compact, you see members of all 7 basin states, and you see members of the federal government, but you do not see any tribal representation whatsoever. As you move throughout the law of the river, in any compacts, the same is true, right? You see pictures and you see representatives from the 7 basin states and you see representatives from the federal government, but you don't see tribal representation. And so that is what I also, we tell our members is that we have claims. The upper and the lower basin run through and adjacent to our nation. As state water law goes, that means even on a state level, we have claims. And so since we have claims, we can continue to work to have our claims become water rights. And the settlement is that mechanism to do that in Arizona. Yes.
I have probably a question that's a little out of scope. So when you guys, is part of the future of this project where you're gonna have like a recharging aquifer zone or, kind of creating your own lake for water, future projections for the entire Navajo Nation? Would that be where this might be heading towards? I don't know if that's like out of scope.
I'll say real quick. We're going to answer that as best we can. This is where we're really happy when we have the hydrologists from the Department of Water Resources because they just this is their scope and they really enjoy talking about it. But I'm going to defer to Dwight because of his knowledge that he learned as a delegate. He has a pretty good understanding of this as well.
So they've been looking at an aquifer storage up near Old Jato, which is just kind of near that Monument Valley region. There's a big bowl that you could potentially store water in Utah. We also have the Navajo Reservoir. We looked at using what's in the Navajo Gallup water supply already existing top water bank, but has never been used to potentially store water. There's a proposal that we're presenting to some of the 7 western states now is to potentially use some of the Navajo or the Lake Powell as a possible site for water in a conservation plan. So there's proposals, but then you also have to get approvals and buy-in. But some of that, once we obtain it, then obviously we can do some of that on our own. The Navajo Nation needs to learn to walk our water across our reservation, and that's very outside of these large regional projects for mainly residential. Agricultural has a big need to walk that water. In the regions I represented, there used to be 3 dams, 2 in Forest Lake and 1 in Hard Rock, and they used to divert water for some agricultural projects. But the upper one broke in the 70s and it broke out the other 2. There's a number of those type of things that need to occur again.
And I would add to you guys that in the settlement agreement itself, there's strong recognition by not only Navajo Nation, but Hopi Tribe as well, that we have conservation limits on what can be used from, especially the N aquifer.
Right.
So there's
an
a strong
agreement,
recognition
right.
of that preservation.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, the Navajo Nation agreed to limit its pumping on the N aquifer to 8,400 acre feet, and Hopi agreed to 5,600 acre feet, and a limit on the industrial to 2,000 for each tribe.
For recharge purposes, correct.
Yeah, and so, because what I was wondering was, since you guys are pumping in water and you're going through treatment and you're pumping into homes, then I would imagine that it would be like an on-site water treatment plant, which will then recharge into streams. I don't know. Maybe I'm out of scope. I'm sorry.
Again, I don't think you're out of scope at all. I'll just go back to mention that our hydrologist, I mean, this is what they do, right? And so again, we tried to couple to have, the legal side as well as the hydrology side. And the work is very much in play to recharge, to treat the water, to conserve as much as possible. Because it needs that. The first part of our presentation was unfortunately the damage that has been done to a lot of the water sources that the nation has access to, and the difficult of how that's difficult to us now. Yeah, and when we talked to our membership, that came up at every chapter that we went to, just over and over again. So I think both of us, we feel very fortunate that we were able to listen to this and that we were able to hear them. And they would love your comment. So they would be happy to hear that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate it. I've always wanted to be a part of something like this. I'm a stream ecologist, and so I don't come from the law side, and I've always wanted to figure out how the two kind of combine. And so it's been really helpful to hear what you guys had to say.
What you said just triggers something. And when all the law students here, we didn't take advantage of it. But we should have mentioned that the Navajo Nation is always looking for summer interns at the Department of Justice. And so I missed that opportunity. That's too bad. But we really are grateful for those who are allies of the nation, and allies to other tribes as well.
We've actually had 2 students from DU that were interns during the semester with us last spring, and they're looking at doing the same. We know we've had other interns during the semester in other units as well, so that's certainly an option that can be looked into. I wanted to see if you could take off the Zoom so I could make a comment separate.
Yes, there's 2 questions on Zoom. Do you want to answer
Yeah,
those
answer
first?
those.
Okay, the first one is, what's the status of the markups for the bills? This is someone that was here earlier and had to leave. Wondering if we did.
So the San Jose stream system has had its markup in the, I think the Senate last week. There's strategy that we probably can't talk about politically to answer that full question fully.
Okay, great. And then the other question is, given the projected declines in the Colorado River flows as the result of climate change, a number of folks are recommending decommissioning Glen Canyon Dam. How might this impact the proposed Navajo water supply project?
Fortunately, our intake is below the it's called dead pool, I think, zone. So our intake system would still be able to obtain the water for our settlement.
Thank you.
And then for the Navajo Gallup water supply, it's also coming from the San Juan as well. So that's a factor that's important on that, for the Navajo Gallup water supply. So it's pre Lake Powell, pre Lake Mead.
Great. Well, everyone on Zoom, thanks for joining us. We're gonna log off.